संसारदावा नलनीतलोक त्रणयकारुण्यागनगनत्वम् प्रपत्सकल्याणगुणर्नवस्य वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम् वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम् वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम् महाप्रभो कीर्तनऋच्य गीता वदित्रमाद्यान्मरसोरसेना गीता वदित्रमाद्यान्मरसोरसेना महाप्रभो कीर्तनऋच्य गीता वादित्रमाद्यान्मनसोरसेना रोमाञ्चकाम्पश्रुतरङ्गबाजो वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम् रोमाञ्चकाम्पश्रुतरङ्गबाजो वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम् श्रीविग्रहाराधननित्यनाना शृङ्गारतनमन्दिरमर्जनादौ युक्तस्य भक्तं शनियुञ्जतोऽपि वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम् वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम् वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम् चतुर्विधा श्रीभगवत्प्रसाद स्वादन्नतृप्तान् हरिभक्तसङ्गम् कृत्वैव तृप्तिं भजत सदैव वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम् वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम् श्रीराधिका माधवयोरपारा माधुर्यलीला गुणरूपनाम्ना प्रतीक्षणा स्वाधनलोलुपास्य वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम् वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम् वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम् निकुञ्जयो नो रतिकेलिसिद्ध्याय यायालिभिर्युक्तिरपेक्षणीया तत्र त्रिदाक्ष्यादतिवल्लभस्य वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम् वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम् वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम् साक्षादरित्वेन समस्तशास्त्रे उक्तस्तथा भव्यत एव शब्दिः किन्तु प्रभोर्या प्रिय एव तस्य वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम् यस्य प्रसादात् भगवत्प्रसादो यस्य प्रसादान्न गति कुतोऽपि ध्यायान्तु वांसस्य यशस्श्रीसन्ध्याम् वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम् वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम् ध्यायान्तु वांसस्य यशस्श्रीसन्ध्याम् वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम् गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम् नमः ॐ विष्णुपदाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिन्निति नामिने कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले ते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिन्निति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वती देवी गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद नित्यानंद अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद। Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Hare Hare. Hariharaya Namah, Krishna Yadavaya Namaha, Yadavaya Madhavaya Keshavaya Namaha. Gopal Govinda Ram Sri Madhusudana, Giridhari Gopinath Madan Mohana. Sri Chaitanya Nityananda Sri Advaita Sita Hari Guru Vaishnava Bhagavata Gita. श्री रूप सनातन भट्ट रघुनाथ श्री जीव गोपाल भट्ट दास रघुनाथ हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे राम 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 हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम राम हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम राम हरे 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 कृष्णा हरे 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 राम राम हरे हरे जयो राधा नीला माधव श्री राधे जयो राधा नीला माधव श्री राधे जयो जगन्नाथ जयो बलदेवा जयो सुभद्रमाय जयो सुदर्शन चक्र जयो सीताराम जयो सीताराम जयो लक्ष्मण हनुमान जयो लक्ष्मी नरसिंह जयो लक्ष्मी नरसिंह जयो लक्ष्मी नरसिंह जयो लक्ष्मी नरसिंह निताय गौर हरि बोल निताय गौर हरि बोल निताय गौर हरि बोल गौर प्रेमानंदे हरि हरि बोल
जय ओम विष्णु पादर परमहंस प्रचक आचार्य अष्टोत्तर शिष्माद डिवाइन ग्रेस भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती ठाकुर शिल प्रभात की जय अनंत कोटि वैष्णव की जय नामाचार्य शिल हरिदास ठाकुर की जय प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत दाता श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद की जय श्री राधा कृष्ण गोपाल गोपीनाथ श्याम कुंद राधा कुंद गिरि गोवर्धन की जय श्री वृंदावन धाम की जय श्री मायापुर धाम की जय जगन्नाथपुरी धाम की जय अयोध्या धाम की जय गंगा माई की जय यमुना माई की जय भक्ति देवी की जय तुलसी देवी की जय समवेत भक्तवृंद की जय गौर प्रेमानंद हरि हरि बोल All glory to the assembled devotees. All glory to assembled devotees. All glory to assembled devotees. All glory to Shri Guru and Gaurang. All glory to Shri Prabhupada ki jai.
Namaste Narasimhaya.
Namaste Narasimhaya.
Praladadayine. Hiranyakashipurvakshaha. Shilatan Kanakhalaya ito Narasimha Parato Narasimha Yato yato yami tato Narasimha Pahe Narasimha Paitaye Narasimha Narasimhadanim sharanam prapade Tava kara kamalavare nakham adbhuta shingam Lalita hiranyakashipu tanu bringa Keshavadhirita Nare Hari Rupa Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Keshavadhirita Nare Hari Rupa Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Jayo Narasimhadev, Jayo Narasimhadev, Jayo Narasimhadev, Jayo Narasimhadev. Jayo Bhakta Prahlad, Bhakta Prahlad, Bhakta Prahlad, Jayo Bhakta Prahlad. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Gurudev, 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 Jaya Jaya Gurudev. नरसिम्हदेव भगवान की, प्रहलाद महाराज की, गौर प्रेमानंदे।
Vrindaya Tulasidevaय Priyaya Keshavasacha Vishnu Bhakti Pade Devi Satyavataya Namo Namaha Vrindaya Tulasidevaಯ Priyaya Keshavasacha Vishnu Bhakti Pade Devi Satyavataya Namo Namaha Vrindaya Tulasidevaಯ Priyaya Keshavasacha Vishnu Bhakti Pade Devi Satyavataya Namo Namaha Vrindaya Tulasidevaಯ राधा देवी तुलसी महारानी की जय।
नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः राधा कृष्ण सेवा पाबो ये अभिलाषी राधा कृष्ण सेवा पाबो ये अभिलाषी जे तो मार शरण लो तार वंश पूर्ण होय कृपा कोरी कोरो तारे वृंदावन वासी अभिलाष बिलास कुंज दियो वास नयने हरिबो सदा युगल रूप राशि निवेदन धरो सखीरनुगत कोरो सेवाधिकार दिए कोरो निज दासी दीन कृष्ण दासे को ये न मोरा होय श्री राधा गोविंद प्रेमे सदायन भासी श्री राधा गोविंद प्रेमे सदायन भासी यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिण पदे पदे यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिण पदे पदे यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिण पदे पदे हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे जय वृंदे देवी जय वृंदा देवी जय वृंदा देवी जय वृंदा देवी जय तुलसी महारानी जय तुलसी महारानी जय तुलसी महारानी जय तुलसी महारानी निताय गौर हरि बोल निताय गौर हरि बोल वृंदाय तुलसीदेव्याय प्रियाय केशवस्य च कृष्ण विष्णुभक्ति प्रते देवी सत्यवते नमो नमः वृंदाय तुलसीदेव्याय प्रियाय केशवस्य च विष्णुभक्ति प्रदे देवी सत्यवते नमो नमः वृंदाय तुलसीदेव्याय प्रियाय केशवस्य च विष्णुभक्ति प्रदे देवी सत्यवते नमो नमः
Shri Radha and Krishna, who were taken shelter with his precious wood. Bestow mercy upon him and make him a resident from Vrindavan. Now desire it is also grant me residence and pleasure of Shri Vrindavan. Thus within my vision I exalted before the beautiful Shri Radha and Krishna. I beg you to make me follow the comfort damsel of Judah. Please give the privilege of devotional service and make your own maid servant. This glorified and adored servant of Krishna, pray, may always swing the love of Sri Sri Radha and Govinda. Tulsi Devi Maharani ki jai.
There are 10 fences in the method chant holy names that should be avoided, and they are as follows. 1. To blaspheme devotees by setting the light for propagating the holy name of the Lord. 2. To consider the names of demigods and Lord Shiva, Brahma, to be equal to independently Lord Vishnu. 3. To discipline the order of spiritual masters. 4. To blaspheme the divinity of the deity of virtue. 5. To consider the glory of chanting Hare Krishna to the imagination. 6. To give some interpretation of the name of the Lord. 7. To commit sinful activities instead of chanting holy name. 8. To consider chanting of Hare Krishna on the auspicious Tuesday of innovative and creative activities, Karma Kanda. 9. To inspect faces present by glorious holy name. 10. To not complete with the chant holy name, and to maintain material attachments you understanding so many instructions in this matter. It is also necessary in the Vaishnava must have regard against these 10 fences. He who quick achieve desire success. Krishna Prema. Now let us have a most humble obeisances. And all the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord who just like this. Chaitanya Shikshastakam ki jai. Cheto Darpana Marjanam Bhava Mahatavakni Nirvapanam Shriya Kairava Chantrika Vitaranam Vidyavatu Jivanam Anandam Buddhivardhanam Pratipadam Purnarmita Sadhanam Sarvatmasnapanam Param Vijayate Shri Krishna Sankirtanam Nam Namakari Bahuda Nija Sarva Shaktis Tatra Pita Niyamita Smaranina Kalaha Etatishi Tava Kripa Bhagavam Mamapi Durudaiva Mitisham Yaha Janina Nurakaha Trinatapi Sunichena Tarorapi Sahishnuna Amanina Manadena Kirtanya Sata Harihi Na Thanam Na Janam Na Sundarim Kavitam Vajagadisha Kamaye Mama Jammani Jammanishvare Bhavata Bhaktir Haituki Tvai Ayi Nanda Tanuja Kinkaram Patitam Mam Vishame Pavam Buddha Kripaya Tava Pada Pankaja Stitha Duri Satesham Vichintaya Nayanam Galadashrudaraya Vadanam Gatkada Rudaya Gira Pulakai Nichitam Mapurkada Tavanama Kahane Bhavishati Yuga Itam Nimishena Chakshusha Pravisha Itam Shunya Itam Jagat Sarvam Govinda Virahe Name Ashri Shava Padaratam Pinnastumam Adarshanam Marmhatam Karotuva Yatha Tatha Va Vitatha Lampato Matprana Natha Suseva Naparaha Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Shri Chaitanya Shikshasam ki jai. Glory to Shri Krishna Sankirtana, which cleanses the heart of all the dust that came for years, and extinguishes fire of conditional life, a repeated birth and death. This Sankirtan movement is the prime benefit of humanity at large, because it spreads the rays of benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It impedes the ocean transcendental bliss and enables us to fully taste the nectar for which all is anxious. O my Lord, your holy name alone grants all benediction human beings. Thus you have hundreds of millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names you have invested all your transcendental energies. There are not even hard and fast rules for chanting these names. O my Lord, out of kindness enable us to easily approach you by holy names. But I'm so unfortunate I have no attraction for them. One should chant the holy name of the Lord in humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than the straw in the street. One should be more taller than the tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respect to others. In such a state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your caustic devotion service, birth after birth. O Sahamarjananda, I'm an eternal servitor, yet somehow I have fallen into this ocean of birth and death. Please pick up from the ocean of death and place me at one Adam to your lotus feet. O my Lord, when my eyes be decorated with tears of love flowing constantly when chanting holy name, while my voice choke up, while hairs my body stand and a recitation of your name. O Govinda, feeling of separation, I'm considering the moment to be like a great millennium. Tears are flowing from eyes like torrents of rain, and I'm feeling all awakening in the world in your absence. I know no one but Krishna as my Lord, and he shall remain so even he handles me roughly by his embrace, or makes me broken-hearted by not being present before me. He is completely free to do anything and everything, for he is always my worshipable Lord, unconditionally. Shri Chaitanya Shikshastakam ki jai. Shri Guru Pranam Mangalacharnam prayer ki jai. Om Jnana Timirantasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshum Litam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurung Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragnatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadhuitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakham Vitamscha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nivishesha Shunyavadi Pachate Desha Tarine Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Namini Shri Varshapani Videvi Daitaya Kripaptaye Krishna Sambandha Vijnana Daine Prabhavin Namaha Madhuryo Jala Premadya Shri Rupanuga Bhaktida Shri Gaura Karana Shakti Vigrahaya Namostute Namaste Gauravani Shri Mutaye Dinadarine Rupanuga Virudapa Siddhanta Dvantaharine Namo Gaura Kishoraya Sasha Vairagya Mutaye Vipralambara Sambodhe Padam Pojate Namaha Namo Bhaktivinodaya Sachidananda Namane Gaura Shakti Swarupaya Rupanuga Varayate Gauravir Bhava Bhumistvam Nirdeshta Sajanapriya Vaishnava Savabhama Shri Jaganathaya Te Namaha Vancha Kalpatarubhishta Kripa Sindhu Bhevacha Patitanam Pavnebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Padayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gauratishin Namaha Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhakta Rupa Swarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakham Namami Bhakta Shaktikam Hey Krishna Karna Sindho Dinapanto Jagapate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Jaitam Surato Pangor Mamamanda Matirkati Masarvasva Padam Bojo Radha Madana Mohano Divya Dvindaranya Kalpajumadaha Shimadarana Kara Sinhasanasto Shimadarada Shila Govinda Devo Prishtaripi Seva Manos Marami Shiman Rasa Rasarambi Vam Seva Tatastitaha Karsham Vinustaner Gopir Gopinatha Shiyestunaha Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Dada Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Ishvara Parama Krishna Sachidananda Vigraha Anadiradi Govinda Sarvakarana Karanam Chintamani Prakrasat Masuka Praviksha Lakshavriteshu Surabhira Bipalayantam Lakshmi Sahasra Shatasam Brahmasevimanam Govinda Madi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Venum Kvanantam Aravinda Talayatacham Parharvatam Samasitam Buddha Sundarangam Kantarpakoti Kamaniya Vishesha Shopam Govinda Madi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Alola Chantakala Savanamare Vamshi Ranankadam Pranayakeli Kalavilasam Shamam Tripanga Lalitam Yata Prakasham Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Anganyasya Sakalendra Vrittimanti Pashanti Panti Karayanti Chiram Jaganti Ananta Chinmaya Sadujara Vigrahasya Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Advaitam Achotam Anadim Anantarupam Adyam Purana Purusham Navayovanam Cha Vedeshu Durabam Madurabam Atma Bhakto Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Pantasukoti Shatavastra Sampragami Vayuratapi Manaso Manipangavanan Sopyasti Yaprapada Simya Vichinta Tatve Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Ekopya Sara Chaitum Jagadanta Kotim Yachakti Rasti Jagadanta Jayaya Danta Dantarasta Paramanu Chayantarastam Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Yat Bhava Bhavitadiyo Manuchastataiva Samprapya Rupa Mahimasanayana Bhusha Suktayam Eva Nigama Patitai Suvanti Govindamadi Purusham
Tamaham Bhajami Ananda Chimaya Rasa Patibhavitapi Tabi Eva Nijarupa Dayakalabi Goloka Eva Nivasati Kalatma Bhuto Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Premanjana Churita Bhakti Vilochanena Santa Sadaiva Hridayeshu Vilokayanti Yam Shama Sundama Chinta Guna Swarupam Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Ramadi Mutishu Kalan Yamina Tishtan Nanavataram Makaropo Nishu Kindu Krishna Sayam Pavanam Pamamyo Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. Sri Ramasamita Ki Jai. Krishna, who is known as Govinda, is the supreme Godhead. He has an eternal blissful spiritual body. He is the origin of all. He has no other origin, and he is the prime cause of all causes. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, the first progenitor, who is tending the cows, yielding all desire, in abodes built with the spiritual gems, surrounded by millions of purpose trees, always served with great reverence and affection by hundreds of thousands of Lakshmis or Gopis. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is adept in playing on his flute, with blooming eyes like lotus petals, and with head decked with peacock's feathers, and with a figure of beauty tinged with the hue of blue clouds, and his unique loveliness charming millions of cupids. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, round whose neck is swinging a garland of flowers, beautified with the moon locket, whose two hands are adorned with the flute and jeweled ornaments, who always revels in pastimes of love, whose graceful threefold bending form of Shyam Sundar is eternally manifest.
I worship Govinda.
Go ahead.
I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, whose transcendental form is full of bliss, truth, substantiality, and is thus full of the most dazzling splendor. Each of the limbs of the transcendental figure possesses in himself the full-fledged functions of all the organs, and eternally sees, maintains, and manifests the infinite universes, both spiritual and mundane. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord. Only the tip of the toe of whose lotus feet is approached by the yogis who aspire after the transcendental and betake themselves to pranayama by drilling the respiration, or by the jnanis who try to find out the non-differentiated Brahman by the process of elimination of the mundane, extending over thousands of millions of years. He is an undifferentiated entity, as there is no distinction between potency and the possessor thereof. In his work of creation of millions of worlds, his potency remains inseparable. All the universes exist in him, and is present in his fullness in every one of the atoms that are scattered throughout the universe at one and the same time. Such is the primeval Lord whom I adore. I adore the same Govinda, the primeval Lord, in whose praise men who are imbued with devotion sing the mantra suktas told by the Vedas, by gaining their appropriate beauty, greatness, thrones, conveyances, and ornaments. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, residing in his own realm, Goloka, with Radha, resembling
It's
his
realm. It's realm.
Golaka with Radha, resembling his own spiritual figure, the embodiment of the ecstatic potency possessed of the 64
Possessed, not possessed.
possessed of the 64 artistic activities, in the company of her confidants, Sakhis, embodiments of the extensions of her bodily form, permeated and vitalized by his ever blissful spiritual rasa. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is Shyamasundara, Krishna himself with inconceivable, innumerable attributes, whom the pure devotees see in their heart of hearts with the eye of devotion tinged with the salve of love. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who manifested himself personally as Krishna and the different avatars in the world in the forms of Rama, Nrisimha, Vamana, etc. as his subjective portions.
Very good. Thank you very much. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swamini Tinamani. Namaste Saraswati Deve Guruvani Pacharine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paskatyate Satarine Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhakti Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Srimad Bhagavad Gita Grantha Raja Ki Jai. So we're going to try and finish the 13th chapter, and then we'll go back to the Srimad Bhagavatam. So we got up to verse number 27. That's chapter 13, verse number 27, which says, Yavat Sanjayate Kinshit Satvam Stavarajangamam Chetra Chetra Gaya Samyogat Tadvidi Bharatarsabha. O chief of the Bharatas, that's referring to Arjuna, know that whatever you see in existence, both the moving and the non-moving, is only a combination of the field of activities and the knower of the field. So, what is this 13th chapter all about? He's trying to teach us how to see things properly. Nobody out of the trillions of people in this world, hardly anybody is seeing properly. Most people are in a complete illusion about reality. And they make up all kinds of theories. Like, for example, look up right now primary and secondary qualities. Primary and secondary qualities. Let's see what the dumbbells say. You have it? Primary and secondary qualities. You got it? Anybody? Take the microphone. What does it say? This is philosophy now that's being taught in colleges and sometimes in high schools. What does it say? Put the microphone near your mouth. Primary and secondary qualities. What are primary qualities?
The important distinction between the primary qualities such as solidity, figure, solidity, figure, extension, motion and rest, which are real properties of physical objects, and secondary qualities such as color, taste and smell, which are merely the effects of such real properties on the mind.
Now this is actually false. It doesn't sound false, but it's actually false. Why? We have to see things from the point of view of Shastra, not the speculative ideas of the imperfect seers. All these scientists, they are imperfect seers. Why? Because every human being has 4 fundamental defects. We make mistakes. We're easily illusioned. Our senses are limited and imperfect. And we have a cheating propensity. Therefore, it is impossible for us to come up with perfect knowledge. We can get some things right and a lot of things wrong, or nothing right and nothing wrong, or nothing right. But we're never going to get everything right. just by our observation. So what is science? It's observation, experiment, theory. But that's not going to give us perfect knowledge. Now, this is one example, the primary and secondary qualities of things. Now, we always begin in our, let's say, epistemology. Epistemology is a big word in English. It means how you see things correctly. Right? So, the Vedic epistemology begins with the verse that says in the second chapter, let's see what it says. It says, Na sato vidyate bhavo, na bhavo vidyate sata, ubayo api dristo natas, tonias tattvadarasibihi. Those who are seers of the truth. Now this is the second chapter, 16th verse. This is the beginning of epistemology, or how to see things correctly in Sanskrit learning or in Sanatana Dharma. Those who are seers of the truth have concluded that of the non-existent, the material body, there is no endurance, and of the eternal, the soul, there is no change. This they have concluded by studying the nature of both. So that means anything that's made of matter, earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, and then subtle mind, intelligence, false ego, does not have permanency. It's coming and going. Now, are the elements, earth, water, fire, air, ether, eternal? Yes. Are they always manifest? No. When they become unmanifest, they're existing in a subtle form, but it's confusing. Therefore, those who are in spiritual life concern themselves only with what is sat, eternal. Whatever is not sat, they can use it in Krishna's service, but they know that at one point it's going to disappear. Now, when it disappears, it's still existing, but you can't see it. So therefore, it's confusing to people. Right? So, what then are the real primary qualities and secondary qualities? Secondary qualities are things that are not so easily measurable, etc. And the primary qualities are things that you can measure. But as long as something is made of matter, it's going to be changing all the time. It's never going to be permanent. So therefore, it's misleading. So therefore, the primary quality of everything is Paramatma. Paramatma is in the heart of every living entity. Paramatma is in every atom of the universe. And Paramatma is eternal. Now, we may not see the Paramatma, but we can experience the Paramatma's existence, either by accepting what's said in the Shastra, or by personal experience. And there's a lot of personal experience of perception of Paramatma. What are examples of that? Well, for example, you have a car accident. Everybody in the car dies except you. How come you didn't die? Well, you could say, oh, it was my good luck, it was this, it was that. No. It's Paramatma. Because for some reason or other, Paramatma chose to protect your material body. Your soul is eternal, but it's the material body that counts. Or sometimes people will pray, and their prayer is satisfied by the mercy of the Lord. So these are the way people perceive Paramatma. Now, the scientists will say, this is a bunch of nonsense, it's all a bunch of your hocus pocus phony spirituality. But people who experience these things don't believe that. But most people today don't believe it, unfortunately. But those who are actually praying, not simply for material benefits, but praying to glorify God, they see miracles happening in their life. And they realize that there is a supernatural being called this Paramatma who's orchestrating these miracles. Okay, so then in the purport of 216, Nasato Vidyate Bhava, there is no endurance of the changing body. In other words, your body is not going to live forever. And even now, it's changing all the time. So you cannot say that the measurable body is seeing things correctly. You can say that the existence of the soul and the supersoul is seeing things correctly, because those two things are eternal. Whereas the material body, the matter of material body is eternal, but the form of the material body is not eternal. So you can measure it all you want, and it's not a primary quality. The primary quality is what is keeping the body alive. And as soon as the soul leaves the body, you're dead. So that's not the primary quality. The primary quality is what's maintaining the body's life and movement. As soon as the soul leaves the body is finished, right? So their idea of a primary quality is wrong. Although it sounds right, because well, you take a rock and we can measure it and it'll stay more or less in the parameters of that measurement for hundreds and thousands of years. Therefore, it's a primary quality. No, not necessarily. Even rocks increase and decrease, and they can become powdered and disappear. Not disappear, but they can be dispersed as if they disappear. And you have mountains that are growing and mountains that are receding. Just like Govardhan. Govardhan is a mountain. They used to be much, much bigger in ancient times, but it's receding now. And it'll continue like that. So the primary quality of anything is Paramatma. And secondary quality is the Jivatma. Jivatma depends on the Paramatma. It's part and parcel. So those are the two, those are the real primary and secondary qualities. Everything else is materially, let's say, dependent on the primary and secondary quality. They're not real, let's say, permanent things. Therefore, they cannot be considered to be sat. I mean, in other words, the forms of the bodies, such as rocks or mountains or material bodies, etc. So it says, there is no endurance of the changing body, that the body is changing every moment by the actions and reactions of the different cells is admitted in modern medical science. And thus, growth and old age are taking place in the body, but the spirit soul exists permanently, remaining the same despite all changes of the body and the mind. That is the difference between matter and spirit by nature. So we are studying, when we study how to see things correctly, we're studying both matter and spirit. When the scientists talk about primary qualities, they're only talking about matter. They're not talking about the soul. So how much can they know about seeing things correctly? Not much. Very, very little. They do not see reality at all. That's why the scientific knowledge is very imperfect. And proof that it's imperfect, it's always changing. They're changing their theories all the time. That means it's not perfect knowledge. Whereas the Vedic knowledge, it's not changed now since the beginning of time till today. See? So then it says, that is the difference between matter and spirit. By nature, The body is ever-changing, and the soul is eternal. This conclusion is established by all classes of seers of the truth. See, seers. This is teaching us how to see. All these verses now that we're going to read from the 13th chapter, they're all talking about how to see correctly. All the seers of the truth, both impersonalist and personalist. In the Vishnu Purana 2.12.38, it is stated that Vishnu and his abodes all have self-illuminated spiritual existence. Jyotimsi Vishnu Bhavanani Vishnu. The worlds existent and non-existent refer only to spirit and matter. That is the version of all seers of truth. This is the beginning of the instruction of the Lord to the living entities who are bewildered by the influence of ignorance. Removal of ignorance involves the reestablishment of the eternal relationship between the worshipper and the worshipable. That means between the Jiva and Krishna. And the consequent understanding of the difference between the part and parcel living entities and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One can understand the nature of the Supreme by thorough study of oneself. That the difference between oneself and the Supreme being understood as the relationship between the part and the whole. Now this is real knowledge. This is what you have to teach your kids. This is what we have to learn first and then be able to teach it to our children. Otherwise, we're going happily along the path of ignorance, birth, death, old age, and disease. So let me ask a question. Have you ever heard this before? What we just read. Have you ever heard this before? No. Have you ever heard this before? No. That's why we're going over it. See? Because this is real knowledge. What they teach in schools is not real knowledge. It's a bunch of crap. Right? So you have to understand this. This is what Krishna is teaching Arjuna 5,000 years ago. And he taught it to Vivaswanu, the sun god, 120 million years ago. And it's the same knowledge. It hasn't changed in all that time because it's the absolute truth. In the Vedanta Sutra, one can understand the nature of the Supreme by thorough study of oneself. In other words, you study yourself, you can understand so much about Krishna. So much about Krishna. Like, for example, if you have a friend who always gives you something and always speaks nicely about you, and you have another friend who always tries to take something away from you and says bad things about you, which one would you like? Which one would you like?
When who talks nice about you or gives you.
Always gives you something. Right. You see. Anybody disagree with that? There are people who say, no, I like the one that takes such things away from me and talks and trashes me in public. Of course not. So now you understand one thing about God. He'll like you if you speak nicely about him and you glorify him. Right? So by studying yourself, you can understand a lot about God. That's just one little example right there. There are many other examples. Right? Okay, so one can understand the nature of the Supreme by thorough study of oneself. The difference between oneself and the Supreme Being understood as the relationship between a part and a whole. Vedanta as well, the Supreme has been experienced by superior and inferior natural sequences. The living entities belong to the superior nature, as it will be revealed in the 7th chapter. So the scientists are trying to convince you that you don't belong to any superior, what's it say? Superior nature. There's only one nature, that's material nature. You see? So how can you see things correctly when there's a stoppage, where you can't go beyond that because we're not going to teach you anything beyond that. That's what they're doing in school. You see? If you understand this one purport, this one verse in purport, you'll be more educated than all the PhDs in the world. See? Because they won't agree with you about this. They'll say, no, we don't believe that. That's your hocus pocus. That's your nonsense. That's your God stuff. We don't believe in a God. So therefore, they're not seeing things correctly. And because of that, there's imperfection everywhere. There's imperfection everywhere. Look what's happening in the United States. In a couple of days, they're going to put Donald Trump in jail. He might not stay there for long. Might only be there a day or two. But they're going to put him in jail. This is a big thing. This never happened before. Putting a president of the United States, accusing him of crime and putting him in jail. It's never happened before. We're in uncharted territory right now. We don't know what's going to happen. There could be a civil war. There could not be a civil war. There was a civil war before in the United States. More Americans died in the Civil War between the North and the South than in any other war that America has been in. More Americans died. Over 500,000 Americans died in the Civil War in the 1860s. So there could be a civil war, in the next couple of weeks or the next couple of months, because this is uncharted territory. So we see, why do these things happen? It's because nobody is seeing things correctly. How do we see things correctly? You have to come to class, and we have to hear this purports like this, and think about it deeply, and be sure that it's right. Then you begin to see things correctly. So then it says, in the Vedanta Sutras, as well as in the Srimad Bhagavatam, the Supreme has been accepted as the origin of all emanations. Such emanations are experienced by superior and inferior natural sequences. Okay, what does that mean, superior and inferior? That means there is matter, which goes through two stages. It's sometimes manifest, sometimes unmanifest. And there's spirit, or the spiritual world, which is always manifest. We don't see it right now because we're in imperfect vision, but the spiritual world is always existing. It never disappears. The living entities belong to the superior nature, as it will be revealed in the 7th chapter. But you go to school, they'll try and convince you, no, there's no superior nature. There's only matter. So what kind of education is that? You're cutting off the major part of reality. Therefore, people are going to be imperfect in everything they do. Although there is no difference between the energy and the energetic is accepted as the supreme, and the energy or nature is accepted as the subordinate. The living entities, therefore, are always subordinate to the Supreme Lord, as in the case of the matter and the master and the servant, or the teacher and the taught. Such clear knowledge is impossible to understand under the spell of ignorance, and to drive away such ignorance, the Lord teaches the Bhagavad Gita for the enlightenment of all living entities for all time. This is what your kids should learn. This is what you should learn. This is real knowledge. The other stuff that's being taught is a bunch of junk. It has no actual tangible value other than to mislead you and not for you to see things correctly. This is serious stuff. We don't realize how serious it is. Okay, so come back. So this is the beginning of epistemology. Epistemology in Sanskrit, in English or Sanskrit, it means how to see things correctly. That's what this chapter 13 is all about, how to see things correctly. So it says here, O chief of the Bharatas, we're starting from verse 27. Know that whatever you see in existence Both the moving and the non-moving is only in combination of the field of activities and the knower of the field. What's the field of activities? It's the body. What's the knower of the field? There are two knowers. There's a jiva and there's Paramatma. Okay, so that's what's in the beginning of this chapter. What does it say in the beginning? It says, Chetra gyam chapimam vidi sarvachetra shrubharata chetra chetra gayor jnanam yajtad jnanam matam mama. This is the third verse of the 13th chapter, and it says, O Skayana Bharata, meaning O Arjuna, you should understand that I am also the knower in all bodies, and to understand this body and its knower is called knowledge. That is my opinion. Okay, so now in the purport, right away Prabhupada says, while discussing the subject of the body and the knower of the body, the soul and the supersoul, we shall find 3 different topics of study. The Lord, the living entity, and matter. In every field of activities, in every body, there are 2 souls, the individual soul and the supersoul. Because the supersoul is the plenary expansion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. Krishna says, I am also the knower, but I am not the individual knower of the body. I am the super knower. I am present in every body as the Paramatma or supersoul. This is what your children should learn. This is how to see things correctly. This is the truth. What are they teaching? Well, no. We don't accept the existence of God or the soul. There's only matter. And we're experts in matter. They're not experts in matter. They don't understand what matter actually is. It's actually spiritual. It's not material. See? So how can they teach anything? They're dumbbells. They're stupid. See? And they're misleading everyone. Okay, so you see why I'm spending so much time on the 13th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavad Gita. It's very, very important. And I mean, I should do the 15th chapter also, but I won't do it right away. Those 2 chapters are so important to teach us how to see things correctly. We're not seeing things correctly. Even devotees, they don't necessarily see things correctly. So, in the purport it says, both material nature, this is text 27, both material nature and the living entity, which were existing before the creation of the cosmos, are explained in this verse. Now, we learned that the Christians don't accept this, that the individual soul is existing before it came into the body, this particular body. No, it's not true. The soul is eternal. So even the religions are misleading people. That's why we studied for the last 5 days, 6 days, how the Christians deviated from Vedic Dharma. And then secondly, how the Hindus have deviated from Vedic Dharma. They've deviated from Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. They made up a big bunch of hodgepodge nonsense. The Christians, and then if you say Christians, you're also including the Muslims and the Jews. There might be some slight differences between the Muslims and Jews and the Christians, but they're all the same religion with just different variances, that's all. Okay. Whatever is created is but a combination of the living entity and material nature. There are many manifestations, like trees, mountains, and hills, which are not moving, and there are many existences which are moving. And all of them are but combinations of material nature and the superior nature, the living entity. Without the touch of the superior nature, the living entity, nothing can grow. The relationship between material nature and the spiritual nature is eternally going on, And this combination is effected by the Supreme Lord. Therefore, he is the controller of both the superior and inferior energies. That means he is the primary quality of everything. That we have to understand, that Krishna is the primary quality of everything. The material nature is created by him, and the superior nature is placed in this material nature, and thus all these activities are manifestations and manifestations take place. The only reason things are growing or diminishing is because of the presence of the Jiva soul, and also Paramatma, because we are growing and receding very quickly in a matter of 50, 60, 70 years. Mountains are growing and receding very slowly. What does that mean? That means they're alive. Why? Because Paramatma is present in every atom of matter. Therefore, matter is also going to grow and recede. But it does it much slower than a human body, which increases and recedes in a matter of 50, 60, 70, 100 years. Whereas a mountain can grow and recede over thousands and thousands of years. See? But they are growing and diminishing. They're changing because they're present to Paramatma. So Paramatma is present in everything, and Jivatma is only present in the body of living entities like plants, aquatics, bugs, and reptiles, and animals, and human beings, and demigods. Okay. So, the material nature is created by him, and the superior nature is placed in the material nature, meaning the jiva comes to the material world because of a mistake that the jiva makes. And therefore, everything in the material world is going to be made up of either only matter or a combination of matter and spirit. But actually, everything is made up of matter and spirit because Paramatma is present in everything. But you see things more quickly when there's a jiva, because the jiva cannot stay in the body more than 100 or a few hundred years. Okay. So now we come to verse 28, which says, one who sees, see, every verse is saying sees. One who sees the super soul accompanying the individual soul in all bodies, and who understands that neither the soul nor the super soul within the destructible body is ever destroyed, actually sees. Do they teach that in school? No. They don't teach that there's an eternal super soul in the body and an eternal jiva in the body. They don't teach that. It's not even clear if the Christians teach that. The Christians will talk about the soul, and they have their own hodgepodge understanding of it. But at least they have an understanding of it. And the Muslims also will talk about a soul, and the Jews also will talk about a soul. But their understanding of it is not completely clear and correct. There is some mistakes there. But at least there's something. Whereas, the modern education, there's zero. They're just talking about matter, that's all. And the purport, Prabhupada says, anyone who by good association can see three things combined together, the body, the proprietor of the body, or individual soul, and the friend of the individual soul, meaning Paramatma, is actually in knowledge, unless one has the association of a real knower of spiritual subjects. One cannot see these three things. Those who do not have such association are ignorant. They simply see the body and they think that when the body is destroyed, everything is finished. But actually, it is not so. After the destruction of the body, both the soul and the supersoul exist. That's why the super soul is the primary quality of everything. And the jiva is the secondary quality of everything. And they go on eternally in many various moving and non-moving forms. The Sanskrit word Parameshwara is sometimes translated as the individual soul, because the soul is the master of the body, and after the destruction of the body, he transfers to another form. In that way, he is master, but there are others who interpret the Parameshwara to be the super soul. In either case, both the super soul and the individual soul continue. They are not destroyed. One who can see in this way can actually see what is happening. See. Everywhere it's see. It's trying to teach us how to see. We're not seeing. We're blinded by modern education. We're not seeing properly. Okay, verse 29. One who sees the super soul equally present everywhere, in every living being, does not degrade himself by his mind. Thus he approaches the transcendental destination. So this is a very important verse. The living entity, by accepting his material existence, has become situated differently than in his spiritual existence. But if one understands that the Supreme is situated in his Paramatma manifestation everywhere, that is, if one can see the presence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in every living thing, he does not degrade himself by a destructive mentality. This is important. And he therefore gradually advances to the spiritual world. So if you don't teach this to your kids, you have abused them. You have not educated them. You're abusing them. And you're making sure that they will not go back to Godhead in this lifetime. You are sealing it for good. And you may understand that there's Paramatma, but unless you teach your kid, they will not understand. Therefore, this is essential knowledge. This is essential knowledge. What they're teaching in schools is essential ignorance. And it's planned to ruin a person's life. The mind is generally addicted to sense-gratifying processes. But when the mind turns to the supersoul, one becomes advanced in spiritual understanding. In other words, until we understand the existence of the supersoul, we're going to be in ignorance. Okay, verse 30. One who can see, again, see. It's not S-E-A, it's S-E-E, see. One who can see that all activities are performed by the body, which is created of material nature, and sees that the self does nothing, actually sees. This is a very important verse. There's a lot of supportive verses of this. Let's take a look at a few of them. Okay. So the 5th chapter, 14th verse, let's see what it says. 5th chapter, 14th verse. The embodied spirit, master of the city of his body, does not create activities, nor does he induce people to act, nor does he create the fruits of action. All this is enacted by the modes of material nature. In other words, they're saying your soul, even though it's in the body, it's not actually doing anything. Everything that's being done is by the influence of the modes of material nature on your false ego. So, therefore, you say, "Oh, I'm going to get I'm going to buy a franchise of lemon. What do you call it? Lemon ice cream or whatever it is, right? And I'm going to make money." That's not you. That's the false ego that's being influenced by the modes of material nature. Oh, I'm going to go and see this movie because somebody told me it's really good. What? What movie is actually really good, right? Most of the movies are all junk, right? Oh, I think I should divorce my wife and marry this other lady. She's more beautiful than my wife. Your soul is not acting there. You're being forced to do these things by the false ego in conjunction with illusion, you see. Basically, that's what this verse is saying, 5:14. The embodied spirit, master of the city of his body, does not create activities, nor does he induce people to act, nor does he create the fruits of action. All this is enacted by the modes of material nature. Okay? Then in the 6th chapter, let's take a look at what it says in the 6th chapter. 6th chapter, verses 5 and 6. What does it say? One must deliver himself with the help of his mind and not degrade himself. The mind is the friend of the conditioned soul and his enemy as well. Then the next verse says, for him who has conquered the mind is the best of friends. But for one who has failed to do so, his mind will remain the greatest enemy. These are two very important verses because it can show how most people are out of control. They think they're in control, but they're not in control. They're completely being controlled by the three modes of material nature. And then, let's see, it says, 13th chapter, 21st verse. 13th chapter, 21st verse. What does it say? Nature is said to be the cause of all material causes and effects, whereas the living entity is the cause of the various sufferings and enjoyments in this world. Okay. So in the purport it says, the material happiness and distress are due to the body and not to himself as he is. Whoa. This would confuse people when they hear this. But this is a fact. His, or the jiva's, material happiness and distress are due to his body and not to himself as he is. In his original state, there is no doubt of enjoyment. Therefore, that is his real state. Because of the desire to lord it over material nature, he is in the material world. In the spiritual world, there is no such thing. The spiritual world is pure, but in the material world, everyone is struggling hard to acquire different kinds of pleasures for the body. It might be more clear to state that this body is the effect of the senses. The senses are instruments for gratifying desire. Now the sum total, body and instrument senses, are offered by material nature, and as will be clear in the next verse, the living entity is blessed or damned with the circumstances according to his past desire and activity. According to one's desires and activities, material nature places one in various residential quarters, meaning bodies. The being himself is the cause of his attaining such residential quarters or such bodies, and his attendant enjoyment or suffering. Once placed in some particular kind of body, he comes under the control of nature, because the body, being matter, acts according to the laws of nature. At that time, the living entity has no power to change that law. Suppose an entity is put into the body of a dog. As soon as he is put into the body of a dog, he must act like a dog. He cannot act otherwise. And if the living entity is put into the body of a hog, then he is forced to eat stool and act like a hog. Similarly, if the living entity is put into the body of a demigod, he must act according to his body. This is the law of nature. But in all circumstances, the super soul is with the individual soul. That is explained in the Vedas, Mundaka Upanishad. And the Supreme Lord is so kind upon the living entity that he always accompanies the individual soul, and in all circumstances is present as the super soul or Paramatma. Do they teach that in school? No. They just say, you don't even have a soul, you just have this body and a mind. So, and that's what's taught by the Buddhists also. They don't accept the existence of the soul. They don't accept the existence of God. They just talk about the mind most of the time. Okay, so, and there's one more important verse here. Let's see where it is. One more reference. Okay, anyway, we'll stop right there and we'll finish this tomorrow. Are there any questions? So what we have to learn is that we're not actually in control of this body. It's being controlled by the laws of material nature, and especially the three modes of material nature. We think we're in control, but actually we're not. And we can only become a controller of this body if we submit ourselves completely to Krishna and follow Krishna's instructions. Then we can say no to Maya. But right now, unwittingly or wittingly, we're saying yes to Maya. And we're being controlled by the material nature. And the proof of it is birth, death, old age, and disease. Okay, any questions?
So, Hare Krishna Maharaj, in 1328, actually...
1338.
No, 28.
28, okay.
Yeah. Actually, I don't understand this. Like, anyone who by good association can see three things combined together.
Okay, now, the word combined is a little bit misleading. And in a letter, February 5, 1970, Prabhupada wrote this letter to Anil Grover. And in this it says, the soul is different than the body. It is not exactly a combination, but it is engagement. This explains it. That's the answer to your question. Right? This is a letter, February 5th, 1970, to a person named Anil Grover. Prabhupada wrote to him. He says, the soul is different than the body. It is not exactly a combination, but it is engagement. So our soul is engaged by the body. It's not mixed with the body. Yeah, the word combination, I said, is a little bit misleading, but Prabhupada says the correct thing here. Okay? You didn't know I knew that. You didn't know I was going to be able to answer your question.
I don't know. I was asking. I didn't know.
I know. It's a good question. It's a good question, and I immediately gave you the answer.
As you said, it's misleading for me.
It's a little misleading, yeah. It's not really a combination, it's engagement. Okay, any other questions? That was a good question. Okay, well, we'll stop right there. And I might deviate once we finish this 13th chapter and have a major discussion about how the jiva falls down into the material world. That's a big question everybody has also. And it should be, I mean, I've discussed this before, but maybe you don't remember. But that would take about 2 or 3 days to discuss it, because it's an important question. Okay, so we'll have Guru Puja.
So one more question, Maharaj. Like in a class, let's say, like a 50 kids sitting in a class, and the teacher is teaching everybody same subject, but everybody has different understanding, and then because of their intelligence,
everyone has different attention.
so
They might not understand, but they have different attention. One is really listening carefully, taking notes. Another one's, writing a love note to some girl on the other side of the classroom. And one is, playing on their computer or their cell phone while the teacher is teaching. So there's different levels of consciousness in that class. All 50 are not focused on the teacher.
Are you saying that if all 50 kids focus same, then they will have same understanding?
Well, if they focus on what the teacher is saying, they'll all become ignorant. Because the teacher is not teaching real knowledge. The teacher is teaching a bunch of nonsense. It's better not to focus on what the teacher is saying. Of course, you won't pass the tests, but you won't get contaminated. Of course, if you say that, so, why did you say that, I don't want my kid to flunk the test, but everyone is going to have a different level of attention. And based on that different levels of attention, one kid will get an A, straight A's, another kid will get straight E's. Because they're not paying attention, or they are paying attention, or they're partially paying attention.
How about intelligence? Do you think that everybody has same intelligence then? Because we are understanding based on intelligence we got, right? Same subject, but if everybody has different level of intelligence.
Everybody is learning what you would call tamasa buddhi. Tamasa buddhi means the ignorance of false knowledge. So they're not being educated. They're being educated in ignorance of false knowledge. Are they teaching about the super soul in the school? Okay, so they're not teaching truth. They're teaching something that's false. That's called tamasa buddhi. Tamas means ignorance of false knowledge. That's why there's false egos, because there's ignorance and false knowledge. And kids are being educated in ignorance and false knowledge. So they're not really being educated. They're being programmed to be consumers, exploited consumers. Do you see yourself as an exploited consumer, Prabhu? How much junk have you collected in your house over the last 5 years? You tell me. You see, they're training us to be false enjoyers and to be consumers, to buy their junk products. Every product you buy will eventually, disappear. So therefore, it's junk. It's not really absolutely necessary. Haribol. Okay, who's going to sing? Let's hurry up.
श्री गुरु चेराना पद्मा केवल बकति सद्मा
Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakti Satma
Nandamui Savadana Mate
Mandamui Savadana Mate
Jahara Prasadi Bai E Baba Turiya Jai
Nara Prasade Bhai E Baba Toriya Jai
Krishna Prapti Hoy Jaha Hote
Krishna Prapti Hoya Hoite
Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chitate Koriya Kya Harana kuri ho mani asha
Harana koriya mane asa
Shri Guru Cherani Rati Aise Uttama Gati
Shri Guru Charane Rati Aise Uttama Gati
Jai Prasade Pure Sarva Asha
Jai Prasade Pure Sarva Asha
चक्षुदान दिलो जे जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से
चक्षुदान दिलजे जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से
दिव्य ज्ञान हृदय प्रकाशितो
ज्ञान हृदय प्रकाशितो
प्रेमा भक्ति जहाँ होते अविद्या विनाशा जाते
भक्ति जहाँ होते अविद्या विनाश जाते
वीर गाय जहरा चरितो
वेद गाय जनर चरितो
श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु आदमा जे नारा बंधु
गुरु करुणा सिंधु आदान जनर बंधु
लोकनाथ लोके राजीवाना
लोकेनाथ लोकेरा जीवाना
आह प्रभु कोरो दोया देह मोरे पादा छाया
प्रभु कोरा दया देह मोरे पदचय
ये बेजास गुसुक त्रिभुवाना आह प्रभु कोरो दोया देह मोरे पादा छाया
प्रभु कोरा दया देह मोरे पदचय
ये बेजास गुसुक त्रिभुवाना श्रील प्रभुपाद पतित पावाना जय प्रभुपादा जय प्रभुपादा जय प्रभुपादा जय प्रभुपादा
प्रभुपादा जय प्रभुपादा जय प्रभुपादा जय प्रभुपादा
जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा जय Gurudeva Jaya Gurudeva
Gurudeva Jaya Gurudeva Gurudeva Jaya Gurudeva
Namaho Vishnupadaya Krishnaprestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nityanamine
Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nityanamine
Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Vashatya Deshatarine
Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Vashatya Deshatarine
Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda
Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Ramo Ramo Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Ramo Ramo Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Rama
Nitya Gaura Hari Bol Hari Bol Nitya Gaura Hari Bol
Gora Hari Bol Gora Hari Bol Nitya Gora Premanandi Ki Jai Jai Vishnupad Paramahansa Paralajika Chasta Tarasatara Shri Shri Madhi Savan Grace Shri Bhakti Vedanta Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Vedanta Koti Vaishnavindi Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Ram Shri Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Vaiti Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakti Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Sam Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Shri Mayapura Dham Ki Jai Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai Tulasi Devi Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Ganga Maya Ki Jai Jamuna Maya Ki Jai Samveda Bhakti Vrinda Ki Jai Nitai Gaura Premanandi. All glories to assembled devotees, all glories to assembled devotees, all glories to assembled devotees, all glories to Shri Guru and Shri Guranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Patita Pavan Ki Jai. Namaha Vishnu Padaya Namaste Saraswati Devi Guru Acharya Visesa Vaskatya Distani. The lotus feet of our spiritual master are the only way by which we can attain the pure devotional service. I bow down to his lotus feet
with
with great
great
honor.
awe and reverence. By His grace, one can cross the ocean of material suffering and obtain the mercy of Krishna. My only wish is to have my consciousness purified by the words emanating from His lotus mouth. Attachment to His lotus feet is a perfection that fulfills all desires. He opens my darkened eyes and fills my heart with transcendental knowledge. He is my Lord, birth after birth. From Him, ecstatic prema emanates. By Him, ignorance is destroyed. The Vedic scriptures sing of His character. Our spiritual master is the ocean of mercy, the friend of the poor, Lord and master of the devotees. O Master, be merciful unto me. Give me the shade of your lotus feet. Your fame is spread all over the three worlds. Shelter of your lotus feet. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.